And I'll be here to talk about what we're going to talk about today on My Modern Myth with Adam and Eric, which is this concept that I work on, and it's called 4D healing. It's not something official. It's not a framework that I've developed, but it's something that I've been embracing and realizing and saying. I think you might agree with this, Adam, that sometimes you say things so many times that you're like, maybe I should really think about it, instead of it just keeps popping up and you're like, oh, well, yeah, there's something here. And when that happens enough, like, write it down on paper. And this is one of those concepts that has just been beating me in the head over and over. So I figured this would be a fun place to kind of pack hunt it together. We might have a visitor stop in. We might not. The door is open. But if he joins us, then we'll pivot and still talk about this, but we'll bring him in. But yeah, let's just get into this 4D healing. And maybe the best way to set it up is to share a story that kind of was the most recent example. I got my tattoo finished. So
yay! Looks nice, by the way.
This is, thank you very much.
Show it off to the camera. Yeah. Special treat for all you YouTube listeners or watchers.
This is one of the... just like doing some weird burlesque show. The weird thing about a sleeve or a bicep tattoo is that whenever you show it to someone, you always go like,
"Oh yeah, which side?"
I'm like, you're like, do I flex? Do I like? Oh, I'm not flexing. I'm gonna go really limp and just then he'd be like, oh, why is he
Look
flexing?
At my tattoo.
Yeah. Oh my god. So there's no really. I haven't found a great way to show it off, except screw it. Bam. Here's the guns, baby.
Just go straight to the gun show.
Just own it. Just take your shirt off. It's on your
That's
bicep.
What you got to do.
Why?
Yeah. I've been watching the Arnold documentary, which is really good, by the way. It's on Netflix. And yeah, it's just a lot of that. It's just the whole show. It's just like, yes, I ran for governor, and it was.
I like muscles.
Yeah. and I actually realized something. I hope this isn't a tangent, but just having watched that, I realized how powerful it is with the right mindset to be an underdog. And I don't know how to put this, but throughout my entire life, I grew up with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, when I grew up, he was already getting into acting. But by the time I saw him there, I kind of thought of him as a joke, like Terminator's like, come on, really? Guys with the accent, and he was made fun of for all of that things. And then he ran for governor of our state, California. And I mean, yeah, he got voted in, but it was kind of like, really, this guy, but like in all of those things, you look back and it's like, holy shit, he put his mind to something really, really big. He didn't come from much of anything, and he did it all. Yeah. And there's something really, really powerful and inspiring about that. And I enjoy it.
I think you're right though, because I felt the same way in the sense of, Arnold Schwarzenegger growing up. Yeah, this is a tangent, but we love tangents here because that's how story and connection. If you've ever been in a good environment with people around a campfire, it's not one story continuously taking you through the whole night. It's all of the inspired tangents that come up, and sometimes that's the best stuff and gets you to the best stuff. So I'm here for it. And he was one of those guys that when I grew up, obviously Twins, was a big, the Terminator movies and Daddy, Kindergarten Cop, and these movies were not necessarily just works of art in the Oscar sense. I think Terminator 2 might have gotten some nods or something, but anyway, he played to his strengths of being a robot, and then he developed acting as he went. Yeah. So he could evolve in his roles, and he took new challenges. And Twins might be one of my favorite movies of Arnold's, even in the current climate of what he's done and different things. But he had this statement that you said where you can't do that, you can't be that, you can't achieve that. And that was that mentality that a lot of people have had. That's the best thing they can hear is they can't do it. And I think you have a concept of being the last finisher of an Ironman and the mindset of both of those people.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the same thing he had was if I can see it, I can be it. Yes. So if I can see the mountain, I can climb it. If I can see myself in Hollywood, if I visualize it, I can achieve it. So he had it in his mind that, yeah, he was the bottom of the barrel, whatever. But as long as he could have that vision and he could see it, he could achieve whatever it was that was in front of him. And that's that same idea of being the best person in the jiu-jitsu tournament and the worst. Like, I can beat everyone and everyone can beat me. So you're going to be humble, but you're also going to be very driven and believe in yourself enough to dream that big, like to become governor.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
and ultimately to totally be willing to suck first. I mean, because like for a lot of people, it's like I'm going to try acting, and then they suck at something maybe
yeah,
for one role, and they're like, okay, I'm done with acting because that was embarrassing or whatever. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger's first movie was a movie called Hercules in New York. And I've seen that piece of junk. It was terrible. And the worst part about it was they overdubbed his voice with like this like
yes.
really crappy like hi, I'm Hercules kind of voice. And it was horrible. But he what he took from that was not like, oh my gosh, I suck at acting, but like, oh, I really have to dig in and figure this thing out. And I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And that's like the big difference is just that persistence of keeping going and that vision of saying like that. And he also said, like, well, why didn't you give up? Well, because giving up was not in my vision. And it's just like, yeah, great.
Wow. Like that's such a powerful, simple statement that is really hard to put into your DNA, but he really is authentic. Like I believe him when he says it. I can say it and it might seem half-assed, but when he said it, I'm like, no, that he actually sees that it's not an option. And one of my favorite movies growing up was, I just totally forgot the name. Sylvester Stallone. He goes in cryogenically frozen for a prison sentence. Then Wesley Snipes' character,
Demolition Man.
That was one of my favorites. Yeah. And in that movie, I forget when that occurred, but they bring Sylvester Stallone out of cryogenetic freezing, and he was the president. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the president, and I remember, that's so because of an amendment, you didn't have to be a natural born citizen, and then he became governor years later. Yeah, and I was like, how? Like, did that put it in his mind? did somehow Demolition Man give him the vision? I could do that. Yeah, right. That is my next goal.
He was just we're promoting this show Arnold, and I think y'all should go watch it. It's pretty powerful. Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. But the interesting thing, as not a tangent but as a way to pivot back, is he had trauma and his family had trauma, and there was this, European, and I'm sure many other places, I'm just familiar as my Scandinavian heritage would say, is of the negative stoic meaning of, suppress everything, toughen up. And his brother was not tough and he was tough. And I think his brother committed suicide or died in a car accident.
DUI accident. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was self-destructive behavior and it led to his early death. And, it was kind of like he couldn't handle life and Arnold could bear it all. Mm-hmm. And I think that works for a small amount of people, but there's a larger number like you and me that this 4D healing concept kind of applies to. And to kind of lay it out to you very simply and then get into a little deeper and talk about it, the four dimensions, the first dimension is the initial event. It's surviving the initial event, whatever it was, the trauma, the car accident, the whatever. The second is the triggers that evolve after that. So you get through this event and then time goes on and all of a sudden a car backfires, a firework goes off, someone's dressed in an outfit, looks like the person that hurt you, and you have a reaction. It's a visceral reaction that's happening again. That's the second dimension. And we have to deal with those triggers. But the third dimension, as we've dealt with those triggers and we're dealing with them, we start now being reactive and triggered still, but it becomes more about the stories that we're telling ourselves about the event, about the trauma, about the reaction to the event, about our continued failure. It's been 5 years and I still can't get over this. I still can't go to this place. I still can't do this thing. And we are not sharing it with people maybe, but that's where the third dimension involves grief kind of coming in, and grief has to be witnessed in safe relationship to start processing and having conversations and seeing it from new perspectives. And as we do that work, we can get into the fourth dimension, which is kind of this place where you are healed, and maybe 10 years later, might be 5 years later, might be 15, but something comes in from a different angle, an unexpected angle. Like, three dimensions is looking at the trauma from all over, from different perspectives and asking yourself questions. Fourth dimension is surprising you with continued new evidence of things you haven't even thought of. And it doesn't knock you on the ground. It's not like those first dimension, second dimension trauma responses. This is like, it can be a gut punch, but it's more because it surprised you. And so then instead of ignoring that and just being like, it's a quirk, you get to look at it from a new perspective and get new information, because that's really the call, is to get clarity, to get new information, because confusion is what allows these traumas and this healing to not the healing not to occur. For me, it's always been confusion, and I've had conversations that cleared it up, and it didn't take everything away, but it lifted a fog that I could, no matter how much I tried, I couldn't get rid of it. And so the simple and not so simple story that I want to tell you that happened related to my tattoo was this. I, was in the military in 2003. We get 2 of our soldiers got captured, and we went on a 3-day mission to rescue them. We had a Delta Force person come in, and they did their thing. They give us intelligence. We'd follow leads and house to house, like all this stuff. And 3 days later, and that was June 26th of 2003. So this is very close to now. So it's always a funky time of year for me, right? Because it lives in your body. June 28th was the day we found them executed on the Euphrates River. June 27th, the evening, we were able to locate the house that they were supposedly being kept in, but we weren't allowed to go into the house. Now, that bothered me because my narrative was, well, if we would have gone in, we could have gotten them, because by the time we went in, they were not there. They had been taken and executed. So there was this issue of like, the story was, I could have, so it's the initial trauma of, oh my God, what, happened? We're sitting there, Taps is playing. They're not answering their names because they're gone. It's traumatic emotional response. And there's visceral reactions of violence, of wanting to kill and just give me a reason, I hate you, and all these feelings to the enemy who has no face, which is also really confusing. But you have all these feelings and you go through life, and then you tell yourself stories like that of, man, we could have done something and they're gone and we could, but then you get enough distance where there's healing, there's therapy, there's, all kinds of things that you're dealing with a professional. So you're grieving it, and life offers you odd opportunities. And if you're open to them, it can be incredibly affirming and challenging. I was not planning this, but my sleeve tattoo has been a year. I ended up starting it around this time of year last year. And the last bit of my tattoo finished on June 28th. So there was this sealing transformational moment where I'm like, wow, this is really amazing. So I can add a new story to empower that day. It's the same, then the next week we had this horrible explosion in the quarry, almost died. And so I got married on that same day. And it was very intentional that my wife and I wanted to build good memories around some of those really bad days, so I could have something else. And so that was cool. But my wife, as we're talking about, I'm like, June 28th, that was the day we found them. And now I get to associate this finishing of a very tough, getting a sleeve tattoo is a painful process. And there was so much trust in it. I didn't design it myself. I told him a concept and I didn't know what it was going to be till I sat down in the chair. And I don't trust people like that. So that's a whole different story. But finish it on June 28th. And she's like, that's like, because she has an employee that she works with that's Muslim. And she's like, there's a holiday. June 28th is a holiday in the Muslim calendar. And what is that? And I looked it up and I forget the name of it, but it's essentially June 28th or 27th. It rotates kind of like, I guess, some of our, like, Thanksgiving isn't the same day every year.
Right.
But it's in honor and celebration of, oh my gosh, I can't remember his name. God told him to sacrifice his son.
Oh, Abraham or Isaac? Abraham.
Abraham sacrificed
Isaac.
Yeah,
that's
I think
right.
that.
Yes.
So it's to honor that. And so, and it's not that this is what happened, but it hit me in a way. And this is the fourth dimension. I was like, so they got executed on the day that they celebrate their willingness to sacrifice their son for God. And this is a holy war. And I put a story into the universe that said the reason that they were executed on that day was as a sacrifice to the God of Islam. Whether that's true or false, I don't know, but it lived in me and it needed to come out. And through a random conversation, the tattooing and finishing of a tattoo on the June 28th, and my wife working with someone in that conversation, creating two pieces to bring in, to think about something that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That I've spent years dealing with, still got into me where I'm like, oh, and humorousness is trauma used to be a gut punch. Like it was like, bam, stars, like this is overwhelming. And as you heal, it's more like getting your nut grazed by a kick.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't hurt, but it goes, oh, this is gonna suck. Just give me a minute. And it's a slow washing over where you're like, God damn it. And so that's what happened is it was kind of this low level, like, oh, gross feeling in my body.
Yeah.
But that is the fourth dimension is stuff will surprise you, get in and be like, oh, okay. And so, yeah, that's my concept. And maybe we can look at it and see if that resonates with you in some capacity. I know it's a lot to ask to say like, hey, where has this happened to you? But I would like to just kind of chat about it just so I can refine my understanding too. And maybe through this conversation, someone else can apply it and be like, oh my God, yeah, I'm here. And that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you bring it up that way, because one of the things I've noticed throughout my life, and I've seen this on the negative. So I'm glad you pointed out on that positive way where you're like taking anchors for negative events at dates, right? And you're able to stack onto that some new events like that might be more empowering, like, like the tattoo, and create that new story that way. Because like I've noticed that there have been times in my life where I have like, where bad things have happened to me on like good days. And then you assign it like, oh, somebody forgot my birthday, and now all of my birthdays are going to suck from here on out. So you anchor that in, and it's like it's almost like that backwards. Like, hey, this day that's supposed to be happy, one bad thing happens because I was putting these expectations on it, and they're never going to be happy again because they're always bad. And I'm wondering if anybody else goes through that like kind of sees that. But I really like the idea of shifting it to this idea of like, well, instead of like stacking all of this trauma into, into being associated with whatever. Well, if you're going to do that, let's also then stack the good things and make those, associated with the days. And hey, over time, if we're going to heal through it, I really like that concept where, over time we can actually stack more things on that healing. So I have to look back in my time and recognize when those kinds of things happen to me. Because I certainly look at, interestingly in my life, I look at January 21st as the most hopeless, hopeless day that I've ever lived. But I look at January 22nd as a new birthday for myself. So, those are, but now I can look back because January 22nd was my new birthday. I don't have to look back at regret on January 21st. And the reason January 21st was my most hopeless day was because I was in jail after a DUI accident. And I just thought I had no control over my life anymore. So obviously that, was anchored in bad, but I walked in on January 22nd, hopeless, wanting not to be here anymore, thinking that I had lost everything. But I had one part that was important, that was willingness. And I had this willingness to heal. And so that became an anchor to me. It's like, hey, every January 22nd, happy birthday. This is my new birthday. Yeah.
I love that. That's the modern myth. Like this is how we're writing a life story. And these choices we're making with our mind and body write that life story. And that's a very mental choice. Like we've talked a lot about physical. We haven't, I don't think, talked a ton about the mental, how we write our story with it. But that's really what this process is. You can use physicality to aid these stages. And where you're at, and it can be fast too. Like I'm not saying that it takes 5 years to get this process. Like you can go to jail. That's an initial trauma. And there might be triggers of alcohol or going to the store that, you're trying to stay sober and prevent yourself from getting into whatever it is. And you can, put up walls and barriers, but you have to go somewhere to get help. And that's where you get into the third dimension of this, I'm trying to write a new story. I'm trying to attach different meaning to it. I'm going to put, my new birthday, like there's
Yeah.
all of this different stuff. And then the fourth dimension is in time. And every once in a while you might see that night in jail differently, because you meet someone who lost someone to a DUI driver, and all of a sudden it hits you, and you get hit with the gravity of the choice that you made, but you're not doing it in a way that you're like, you know what? No, I'm a piece of shit because I did that. That was me. No, it's like, oh man. And it reinforces the life you're living now. Like that's the empowering part. And you always have the ability to choose the disempowering path or the empowered one.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And what, what kind of got me there was I realized like, yeah, when you mentioned like walking by alcohol, I still to this day, 11 years later, I mean, when I walk into the grocery store and I have to get a bag of chips, they put the chips right across from like the alcohol section.
Yeah, of course.
I always like just like kind of do that blinders thing. Like, oh, I'm not seeing the alcohol. I'm not.
He knows there's no one there.
Want it. Yeah, it's just like this habit now. It's like grown into that. I'm like, oh, I don't want to go do it. I don't want to go do it. So
he's one of those TikTokers.
Yeah, right.
TikTok dance. It's a sobriety hack.
Yeah. But no, yeah. So I think that, I mean, and yeah, when I look back on that time in jail, yes, at the time it was traumatic. And for many months after it was traumatic, but it became transformational, because it's what, I mean, I look back on it's what I needed to make that transformation. And so the story I tell myself about it now, and this was a hard story to come to a rationale about, because I thought of myself as a piece of shit because I did something I never thought. I mean, the story I always told myself was that all people who drink and drive are horrible, selfish, brutish pricks who just don't care about other people. And there I did it. And now, whoa, how does that affect my story? Am I a horrible piece of shit who doesn't deserve to live because I drank and drove? Well, part of me was saying that night, but the other part was like, well, if I have no control over my life, I better heal. And that opened the door to, and I'm going to get spiritual here, but this is what happened for me. It was a spiritual experience that happened for me. It opened the door to God, to some spiritual experience in there. And so I can look at that experience as a spiritual shift that transformed, and an experience of grace, because it ultimately, while cars were damaged, it led to healing and no other damage than that. So, I mean, can we say it was a good experience then at that point? I don't know. I mean, we could tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like to say things happen and we give it meaning, or we give it a reason. Not that they happen for a reason. I struggled with that because, I was like, I couldn't find like this. It's all about your comfort and how you can make it an empowered statement, I think. Mm-hmm. And some people will say it and be like, oh, so it was, God's will. It was meant to happen that this terrible thing would happen to me. That's the only way I could learn this lesson. And I don't know if that's true. I just know it did happen. That's irrefutable. That's the fact. And what I also know is I have to live after it. Mm-hmm. So I have to understand and give it a reason. And that reason for you is I'm never going to drink again, and I'm going to change my life, and I'm going to find God. I would never look down on you for that decision. Mm-hmm. Will I say, thank God you got it? No, I'll say, thank God no one got hurt. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And thank God that you made that choice, because I have stories that I've told myself about that where, man, I didn't know, because the story I told myself about drinking and driving was I didn't get a DUI and I should have. Mm-hmm. And my friends did in other situations. And why wasn't I in a jail cell? What am I going to do with my life because I didn't go to a jail cell? And I watched them struggle and I succeeded. And I felt like it was never good enough. It was never big enough. I was never doing enough to earn that grace when they were just struggling to get by and continued to make bad choices because they were helpless against it because of this DUI. And so you can tell yourself stories of guilt wrapped around your avoidance and your salvation from this tragedy, this thing. And I had to cultivate an attitude of gratitude, to be grateful and to stop guilting myself, shaming myself, honestly, saying I shouldn't have been given that. I'm a piece of crap. Like, I'm garbage. I should be in jail. I could have had a felony. Like, why didn't I? And I'm wasting my life. Well, no, it's not that I'm wasting I don't have to do something grand. I just have to be who I am and figure that out and live that every day of my life and let that be enough. And that is the change in me, where this process of this 4-dimensional healing that I try to walk and I try to live is ingrained in me, because it's the only way that I can feel like, okay, like I'm okay and I can keep trying. Even though I haven't succeeded yet, I'm 39 years old and I may never change the world. But if I figure out who I am and I live that to my dying day and continue to try to grow and give that to whoever is around me, then I've done enough. And I'm not going to justify why someone else is better than me or someone else is worse than me because of what they've achieved and done. Because we're all doing the exact same thing, is trying to figure out who the hell we are and then be that,
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
on cue here, someone just snuck into the room.
We got a visitor.
Who is this guy? It's not Sam Crumrine, is it? I don't know, man. My good friend Sam, it looks like he popped in just out of the blue. I can't believe it. Now, one thing I'll say about Sam before he talks is, thank God he's got a personality, because he's nothing to look at. Just oh, there he goes. He's putting on his Noxzema, his cream, to stay young and youthful. Yeah, we're back.
I was trying to hide the bags under my eyes with the muted button, and apparently that's not how technology works. So, check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
I think we can work with this.
Is that better?
I think so. Adam,
better,
what do you think?
Or worse?
Oh, no, okay.
Hey.
We're in the same space.
That sounds great.
We're in the same tone. Is this better or worse than what it was? Curious.
Better.
Okay.
That is better.
Yeah.
But we're still quiet.
It's quieter than us, but we're pretty masculine, manly men.
I know. I need to step up. I need pure volume right now. That's the only way you're going to communicate my soul, is all volume here.
I need Sam Kinison from you, not Sam Crumrine.
Okay. Let me see what I can do. Can I pay for that procedure? Is that something that I can do? Okay. Great.
Oh, you know what I've realized now, looking at you guys, is we essentially, as a trio, could start a folk Americana band, because I drum.
Yeah.
And you guys are both good singers, and you Adam has been playing banjo, learning banjo.
I'm getting there.
He's good on other strings. Sam, you're a singer. You're out there gigging and you're acting, and so we are a creative bunch.
I play guitar and bass as well. So if we need a low end on to contrast the banjo, let's talk.
Nice.
Let's sing.
Yeah, I see a guitar in the background there. I've got my own Strat back here, so. Yeah, I can play cello too, so we can go all crazy.
Talk about a motive.
I'll bring the violin out. I haven't played in years, but I used to play. So we got
hell yeah.
I don't know what we're doing on this podcast. Let's start making some music, everyone.
We got to play some music.
When did My Modern Myth become a band?
We'll call Avett Brothers 2.
I feel like My Modern Myth is actually a really great band name. So
it would be.
It is. Yeah.
Corner that pocket.
You know what makes it good? Yeah.
The alliteration.
What makes it good is there's no the. Every band name I make has the Cure, or the Disembodied Heads. I don't know.
Yeah.
My Chemical Romance. It could have been The Chemical Romance, but they chose to take ownership.
I think yes, that's what we're all about. Is taking ownership, like My Chemical Romance. I dig it. Well, Sam, thanks for joining us. For everyone who doesn't know, Sam is my brother from K4. We were co-creators of this place called Storytellers, which is very much this that we're doing, but in the K4 community, which is a community of men, honor-based culture. We're talking about king, warrior, magician, lover, and just optimizing our lives through understanding our masculinity. So a lot of what we did there is carried over into here. It unlocked a lot in me. So being able to work with men like Adam and Sam is a pretty big deal. And I don't know, I think I'm just really happy because you bring a flavor, you bring a different look. And that's what this is all about. Is we just talked about the fourth dimension of healing, where it's perspective. And it could be, I healed for 15 years and I meet Sam or I meet Adam and he says one thing and I'm like, oh shoot, I haven't thought about it that way. And that's one of the benefits of this healing journey. So, happy to have you, Sam, and let's just jump in, I guess, huh?
Yeah, let's jam. Awesome. I thank you for giving me a little heads up around your perspectives on the content as well too, because of course, like who is a master at dealing with their stories and their trauma and learning how to articulate and integrate? Like, is there mastery in it? I don't know. Is there momentary mastery? I hope so. I hope so, because that seems to be the way that it keeps unfolding. So just grateful to be a part of the conversation and see what, if anything, can shed some light through my experiences and paradigm to help encourage others to continue the journey. So glad
Yeah, one thing I'd like to ask you, from your perspective, like I mentioned that you are an actor, you're a entertainer, you're a not an entertainer. I wanted to say the word performer, and part of that performance is telling stories, but maybe not the story you're trying to tell, but you're drawing on energy from a story that's related. This is like method acting, right? Where you've never done the thing, but you have an emotion that's similar to the thing. So going and connecting to your own story to elicit response in someone else, which is cathartic to you. Would you wax a little bit about that concept as an actor and as a healing person, how they kind of empower each other, that practice of connecting to a story and using the energy in an empowered way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all simple. You just fake it the whole time. And there you go. And
thank goodness.
And Oscar worthy.
Yes.
No, no. So yeah, I've been telling stories through film and music and on stage, all kinds of different things for a long time, and I feel very grateful to be able to do so. And this journey has provided as much to me as through catharsis and understanding who I am as it has been to either to portray someone else's fictional life. And the beauty of this work is to be able to bring myself to the stories of other people and empathize, purely like practicing empathy at the deepest level of, can I get behind, or not necessarily have to agree with, but feel with whatever this person is going through, and not from a place of critique or judgment, but as being with them, because I'm going to have to give them the most honor by trying to bring their life forward as honestly as possible. And what it's going to require is me experiencing the depth of their inner world, if I can. And it's going to be a union between mine and theirs. And so to your points around the story, the reason that I feel like this is really accessible and powerful work is that you can take lots of different actions of any character or person, and the actions may look different, and the variables of their environment may look different, and the circumstances that they're in may be different. But at the core, there's something there that we've all touched and experienced. And am I worthy to be here? Can I handle what's in front of me? Are people receiving me, and am I receiving them? There's so much on just a human level that we are constantly, I think, at play with internally when we are, especially in community and when we're by ourselves. So most of the time when these fictional circumstances are given to me, what I am asked to do is just resonate with what might be the core story that's moving in that person, that inspires them to take the action that the story says they take. And I've had just the blessing to be able to do this for some time, to continuously try to discover more truths within myself that I have access to. And when I am given a story that feels like, how am I going to access this? This is so not something that I am either comfortable with diving into, or I've never been in that experience. Those are the most, I think, rewarding and fulfilling aspects of this work that make me want to keep coming back every time the challenges of the business or the challenges of production or time and life balance come to play, because I always finish or leave either a moment in a scene or after a production having learned something new about the world and myself in turn. And so I think to me, it's the whole aspect of storytelling is to try to take our inner life and bring it into this outer articulation, and hopefully order it in some form of beauty that feels accessible and receptive to other people. And at the end of the day, if I can bring as much honesty to that, then I can do a service that I feel like is potent in the world, but it requires me to be honest with myself in that process. So it is a giving, receiving art form, and I am constantly humbled by it, and I'm grateful to be so. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And it's so relevant to how we live our lives. And it's just something I've been noticing a lot is, I'm not an actor, but I work in movie
you do play
creation,
one on TV.
But I do play one on TV. That's right. Wait, I wish.
That's insane.
No, Where's my residuals? So the fictional situations of the actor's portrayal versus truth in our personal lives, but the weird part about that is truth and fiction both exist in the same spectrum, because we're often responding to a situation that is not the situation that traumatized us, that hurt us. It's just replicating it. So it's almost like we are acting out a psychodrama from the past. But actors are one of the only group of people that practices this. And I think maybe it can be to a detriment, because some actors, I think, give too much and they don't have boundaries to be resilient, and they go off into addiction and to lots of rough stuff. But there is so much potent energy to be found in the performing arts as a way to open up to those fires and to feel it. And that ability, I believe, and I don't know this for fact, but I think there's a lot of gold there, because in learning to empathize with others' stories with a fictional character, and then empathize with ourselves to feel the feelings and, the situation that I've never been through, like, it's the root emotion. Because though a DUI is different from a war trauma, they're still emotional responses to physical events and situations. And that's what our life story is how we react to whatever is in front of us. So at that level, we are the same. It's just a different presentation. And so when we're acting in our own lives, all the world's a stage, right? This is my story. I'm the main character. How I go through this process, surviving the trauma, getting triggered later in the second dimension, and dealing with those triggers in the third dimension of writing the stories. What stories am I telling about myself, about the situation? Whose fault? Am I taking ownership? Am I blaming? Am I becoming a secondary character in the story and saying, I'll never achieve because this person is the one who robbed me of all the glory that was supposed to be mine, and I'm off in the whatever, in the periphery of my own life, because I'm too afraid to get out there. I just, the enemy's too big. And, or am I going to empower myself? Add, this, we talked about this before you got here, Sam, the birthday thing. Sometimes birthdays are hard. And my birthday, November 17th, was the day that I lost one of my best friends in the military in a helicopter crash. And so I didn't like my birthday. I stopped immediately. Like, my birthday's a bad day, and married my wife, and birthday's a bad day. And she said, why don't you honor him on your birthday? And I was like, you know what? You're right. And so he was Native American. This is very, probably tone deaf of me now. I decided to do a smoking ritual, because I knew that tribally they did, peace pipes and rituals of that nature. So I just got a pipe, and I thought about him. And then my kids watched me do that. And they're in their trampoline and they push their faces against the netting, and they go, Daddy, are you smoking? And I said, yes, honey, to remember my fallen brother. And they said, that's disgusting. You're going to get cancer. And immediately I'm like, well, there goes that tradition. So even when you empower yourself in the meaning, you have to be flexible enough to pivot, because it's not always just roses, but hey, what are you going to do?
Bubble pipe.
Keep kids around is what you're going to do, because they'll call you out, honestly.
Right, yeah.
I thought it was supposed to be like this emotional connection with them. That's disgusting. You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah.
You want the truth? Yeah. Have kids. That's the rule.
Yeah, it's still a beautiful ritual, though, and the way to kind of talk about a great example of changing that story and taking ownership of it and empowering it rather than letting it overpower. And I think that seems to be like the core lesson in my season, at least, but just how to do that with grace, how to set intention around doing that, because it takes energy, and it takes time, and it takes courage, and it takes grace to be able to dive into those and then actually take time to write that story, the new one that you want to share, and then put that into action. Writing the story is one thing. As you know, taking action is a completely different experience. And how to create discipline around that action is that next step. And, how to have grace when the discipline fails, and then re-upping and doing some more discipline and some more organization, and then learning new wisdom to integrate it into our life that might make more sense that first iteration did not. And it seems to be just a constant step forward. But I really do appreciate the choice to just continue to take the next step. And I think if I were to say what art has given me in the process of making it is just that the grace to continue to take the next step, because until it's complete and shared, it's not finished. Until it's shared, it's not finished.
Yeah.
And it's a constant evolution within me to then give it to someone else, and then it's no longer mine, and it's going to be perceived in so many ways. So I just I think anything that comes back to me right now is just continue to make the next step and to have courage to iterate when it's not working in the way that it can. And it's not going to, and from one season to another, it's going to shift. And because we are changing, ever changing. So, yeah, I just appreciate you choosing to do that. And then in that moment, your daughter said, "Daddy, you're disgusting for doing that." You're like, you know what? I can make a pivot here. I can adapt in a new way, you know?
Yeah. That's my go-to is pause, pivot, and pursue. So just take a minute, take a beat, take a small change, and start walking in that new direction. Not
that 1
throw
degree.
the pipe at them and be like,
Right. So it's not react, rage, and remorse.
Retribution.
Throw the pipe at the child, scream at them. "You don't know, I was in the war. My buddies did not die face down in the mud so that you could tell me I'm disgusting, you little ungrateful." I went too far. Oops a daisy. Daddy loves you. So I wonder though, how we go through this process and fail, as you said, because we do. I mean, Adam, you're going to be giving a speech, and you're pursuing that path. Sam, you're up on stage singing, and if I'm not wrong, originals, right? Like, so maybe you forget your words. Both of you, I'm speaking both. Maybe you don't present the words in the tone that you wanted to. Hell, maybe your voice cracks, and maybe you're flat. Maybe you're so wrapped up in the performance of it that you forget where you are in the song or the speech. But then you recover. I mean, the artist, the performer, is always way more aware of the failings than the audience is of those failings. Because I know I've performed and spoke, and I've riffed for 45 minutes off of a topic and had no idea where I was going, and everyone thought it was, planned. And the whole time I'm panicking, going, "Oh God," looking at the clock, like, how am I going to run this thing up? And then you just do it, and you're behind the curtain. You're the Wizard of Oz pulling the levers and freaking out or beating yourself up. And then people tell you, "Good job." And then what do you do? No, not really.
Only you knew.
Yeah, if only you knew. Yeah. So how do you guys navigate that inner conversation?
I'm going through it right now. As I kind of develop the keynote, I've been giving it, and it's one of those things where it's at a certain point it's good enough, but you want to get the feedback, and most of all, you want the negative feedback so that you can improve, right? Or the constructive feedback. But instinctively, my brain wants to like put it all on top of each other and say, well, this whole thing is garbage, and now I need to rewrite the whole thing. And it's hard when it's your story too. You're telling your story, and you're trying to incorporate models and things like that into it that are building on it. But yeah, it just doesn't. So yeah, so I kind of like went with, I was just kind of like not feeling very good about it last night. So I said to my wife, I just said, "Look, let's just go through it, and you tell me honestly, because you'll be honest with me. Where is it not working? Where's it? Where can I work it?" And she told me flat out, I'm not telling enough of my story here. I'm not being vulnerable enough. I'm not going deep enough on the things I need to go deep on. I'm holding back. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to make sure everybody in the audience is happy with what I'm saying, that everybody connects with it. And by that, in that process, I'm connecting with nobody.
Yeah.
So it's like this deep, so it's aggravating, it's soul crushing, but it's ultimately that's where your breakthrough comes through, but it's hard to navigate, especially during those times, So
yeah, that's like the idea of winning over a room versus sharing your story. Like, what's the are you thinking about my my wife's boss will talk about, are you thinking about the gold medal or are you thinking about the competition? Like if you're thinking about the gold medal, which is the perfect performance, captivating everyone's attention, then you're focused on something that is going to throw you off and prevent you from ever getting to the gold medal. It's like just that one connection, finding one person where you have connection in the room, like that one response of the sway of the laugh that you were hoping to get. And I think in the speech world, I've gotten a few laughs when I wanted them. And then after the speech, in my casual banter, I got the biggest laugh I ever got. And that was because I made a connection because there was a guy in the third row that had a beard just like my tattoo. Like he looked like and I was like, bro, I got to tell you, you distracted me this whole time because I realized I have you tattooed on my arm. And I showed him my arm and everyone just laughed and erupted, and I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want. But I wasn't trying to get the laugh. I was just being present in the moment, carefree. And it's like getting to that level of carefree presence is the gold medal, because how are you not going to win over people if you're able to get to that level of presence?
So, and is that so that tattoo, is it a Norse god on your arm there?
It's supposed to be like a chieftain, right?
Okay.
And then
so I was going to say your arm, like when they did that, it must have been really Thor. Sorry.
Seriously, Thor.
Well, it hurts.
Yeah. Well, to that point, we're always improvising, and we're always doing it. It's our life is improvisation. There's no difference. That to me, there's an aspect of, if I can't improvise about what I'm singing about or talking about, then I probably shouldn't be talking about it, because I might not have that level of belief, or it doesn't have that highest stakes in my life. And no shame around if I do or don't, but if I'm going to be up on stage trying to share something, well, the most honest thing's probably going to come out when we go off script. And it's the same thing about a take where you go, we want one more take and let's just throw the script away. And there's usually something potent that comes out that's been swirling in the subconscious or unconscious of the actor who's been connecting to the character, and then all of a sudden they say something that is so much more part of the inner life than ever could have been written on the page. And that's what we connect with. We connect with authenticity. We want authenticity. We want relatability. But the beautiful aspect of it is authenticity is typically most relatable, because either someone's highlighting something that someone is afraid to say, and we see that courage and we just wish we could be that person, or we are grateful that that person said it, or we're finding a part of ourselves that we get to discover. And if we're not journeymen in this experience of life that's constantly exploring and discovering, and we hold that as such a high value, then we're stagnant. And I think that's always going to be attractive. So to see someone be able to riff, and to see someone claim that vulnerability is really powerful. And so a buddy of mine named Doug Schmidt, I was just talking to him earlier today, and kind of brought up the 2 out of 3 rule of, and we're talking about music specifically. He was talking about authenticity, relatability, and technicality. And really, you only need 2 out of 3. You can be really authentic and extremely technical proficient, but you don't need to be as relatable, because you're blowing people's minds in certain capacities. You can be a terrible guitar player, shit singer, no technique, but you can be authentic as hell and be relatable within it, and you can touch the hearts of millions. It's so at the end of the day, if I find I get into my head and I'm starting to spin into my own asshole around, like, I'm not doing this perfectly, or I missed a note or something like that, the quickest way back to be able to get with the people who are here, who I have the responsibility to share with, is to just find peace and presence, and own whatever just happened. As soon as I try to hide it, or as soon as I'm trying to cover it up and pretend it doesn't exist, I'm lying to them. I'm manipulating them. I'm manipulating an untruth. And that's not fair. And I think that immediate bit of trust, if we're going to give to anyone who we want to give to, we need to hold that as honest. And that's why we all love seeing performers up on stage who are just riffing and don't give a shit and will mess up or do whatever, and they own it. They could fall down a flight of 12 stairs and get up and just own it. And there's that was the show. Now we're invested. It wasn't about anything that you'd done previously, but because you fell down those stairs and stood up with the utmost ownership of acknowledging what just happened, you're allowing us in. We're in now. We're with you. And all at the end of the day, we want is some form of connection and a moment away from this imagined loneliness, if I were to speak it as such. But That's how I deal with it. And I just take it as a responsibility to be as honest and present, even with the flubs or the miswords or the technical aspects or the crack in my voice.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It's funny because thinking about falling down the steps from that example, there's like the power in that. But then if you're like, I'm going to add that to the show every time, like the second or third show,
Right.
all of a sudden it's like, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel like really, like, so then
Eventually
it's like
you're Chevy Chase and you're just falling all the time and you're like, hey,
what happened? but that manufactured, it becomes fake and inauthentic.
Yeah.
And it becomes forced and something else. And I love that idea, the way to, have two of the three things. It really resonates in a lot of ways. And that's why I think this, we talk about healing being important so we can be happy and stuff, but it's not about happiness per se. It's about when you heal and see where you are, keep going, you become more relatable. Like I've given a speech in a bar about sobriety while everyone was drinking. And because I was relatable, and not condemning, relatable and not condemning, they listened to me and clapped and stopped drinking and talking and listened to what I had to say. I wasn't converting them to sobriety. I was telling my story and talking about pain and suffering and using things to cope with the pain and that suffering and doing it from a place of empowerment, not from bleeding all over everyone because I've never healed these wounds. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not crying. I'm able to ride my emotions and control them, let them out because they're much more reduced, and instead of just like falling down now for 5 minutes crying in front of people because it was too raw, so it's really like, how do you know where those boundaries are? And then as you go expanding those boundaries, like I can talk about things I used to not be able to talk about because of this work. And then because of sharing it in safety with people like you guys, that's the step one. And then in that group, I realize where those boundaries are. And I say this because we are performers, we are presenters, and we all are. I'm saying all of us, because every day we go out and we're in environments where we're showing up as ourselves, which is the hero of our individual story. And I need to know where those limits are. I need to know where I can confidently go to connect with this person, this one-on-one conversation. And if you don't have a place to try and see where those limits are, you might put yourself in a situation like I have and embarrass yourself. And embarrassment is shame. It means you don't have confidence. And that's partly because you didn't have any real thought going into it. You just said it and did the thing, were impulsive, and it didn't go well. And now you fell down and you can't own it because you're so insecure because you did something you probably shouldn't have done. And it wasn't an accident. Like, that's the other thing, is it wasn't an accident. Falling down the stairs, that's an accident. You can, you can own that if you have the confidence to stand back up and be like, there's 10,000 people here to see me, But if I do it, I realize nobody probably cares that I fell down the stairs, and then I just walk off, But it's really, what is it? Clarity. Having clarity on your own story leads to confidence. So you can have that ability to go and not really need the reaction. Because I think sometimes we get into that, right, where we need the reaction. I used to release little movies to people and quickly realized I needed them to react a certain way. And when I realized that, I stopped making movies because I realized I was doing it for the wrong reason. But how much do we go out looking for a reaction, looking at that gold medal, and then they don't give us the reaction we wanted, and now we're mad at them, and we're going to take our cookie and go home and not share our talents with the world because you didn't get it.
That mirrors what Adam was saying about that feedback aspect of like really being grounded and recognizing the value of feedback that maybe doesn't align with the most idealistic utopian version of what had just been created or what we thought, and kind of the beauty of healing, and like so much of it has to do with, using the term shadow work. I'll throw that out there for those who want to take it or those who don't. Either way, diving into the things that are a little bit more further into our subconscious or unconscious that we don't want to look at, or that we haven't allowed to exist within ourselves, though it already exists. And so the beauty of, what receiving that feedback is just so beneficial because it lets us know where we are in context to the world. And without it, we're living in a fantasy space. And a lot of the time it's comfortable to live in fantasy. It's more comfortable because it feels better to live in potential than it does to recognize where we actually are in context to everything else. But the only way we can improve and grow is to understand where we are in context and use those as mile markers, use those as inspiration, use those as points to go, okay, now I have an understanding where I am in context and I can move with this. And it's really hard to, as someone who has dealt with lots of perfectionism and I lived in Hollywood for 11 years. Of course, I had stories and ideas of who I was supposed to be that was going to be valuable and what that was going to mean for me. And I tried my damnedest to live up to all those fantasies. And at times I was rewarded. And at the end of the day, it all felt like a fallacy. You're coming back in the season I am now. It's like, wow, that was a different person. That was a different life. But what I wasn't open to was the feedback of those that didn't align with the vision that I had. And even when it was coming from the closest people in my life. And when I started opening up to that is when I feel like some of the most astronomical profundity when it came to my own healing and my own, like knowing who I was at a deeper level than the archetype I was asked to play and that I chose to play. There was more clarity there, and it was painful and it sucked because I wasn't the person I thought I was. And I think at any time we go into these healing experiences, we're having to look at parts of ourselves that either we have deemed intolerable or does have a pain that has a story connected to maybe someone that we love or ourselves that is going to reveal where we are in context to actually the life that we're living. And it's humbling. But there's so much beauty to it because at least from there we can take action. From there we can move in general contrast to what's around us. And I think at the end of the day, all of us want to be in community. We don't want to be living in our fantasy islands of success because who cares? You know, it feels good maybe for a moment when we're young or when we're in a new space, or it feels good for a moment because we need to have that vision. But if it doesn't include the people that we're around, every old person I've ever heard on their deathbed says, it's never, I wish I worked more and was isolated from people. It's always, I wish I spent more time with the people I cared about. And that humility in the context includes those people. And that's the space that we get to grow from and take action from. So do the fucking work, dive in, and it's hard and it's painful, but be okay with knowing where we are in context. I'm speaking to myself constantly in these lessons. And,
sure.
Regularly.
Yeah. And that's power. That's so powerful. I think, that it kind of ties back into what Eric started in this whole conversation, which is, those 4 dimensions of healing where, it almost requires that when we change our story, we have to break something in ourselves, and we have to be willing to let a significant part of ourselves die in order to allow that, that next version or that next story to grow and emerge. And I think I agree. Community is such a powerful part of that. I mean, everybody I've ever talked to about like any kind of healing, especially or personal growth, development, whatever, what have you, always takes a community and being willing to step in courageously into that community. It's just powerful.
That's the thing with healing is community, because you can't heal in a vacuum. You can't experience grief in a vacuum. Like you can sit on your couch. I think Sam, you were talking about this, everything sounds good. Like I should do this. I've told myself recently, cause I've been in like a month kind of a funk, and part of it is a lack of community. I know this. So I'm making changes because you get awareness and you can make decisions based on that awareness. And that is get back in community, you idiot, And so there's this thing that says, oh, well, I'm experiencing this and I'm not working out. I need to work out in ways that I can because I have this limitation and I can't work out the way I want to. So I just don't work out. Well, I come up with this plan and then I don't get off the couch. Mm-hmm. Well, man, that wasn't much of a plan, was it? Because you didn't take action on the plan. So you just sit and then you feel worse, or at least I do. I come up with a brilliant plan. I script out the perfect movie and then I do nothing about it. And I talked to you about this, Sam. I think you sent me a message about it, about this idea that it becomes poison. like all of these brilliant ideas, whether it's how to take back your life, how to heal, where to go, what to do. If it stays in you, it's poison, and it starts to eat away at your soul because it was supposed to be out. It's supposed to be let out of your body somehow. You're supposed to do something with this energy. And this is that process of time and community. Time is hard to passage when you don't have community to pass with. The World War II veterans came home for like 3 months or 2 months or whatever over on the boat, and they talked about traumas. They talked about the war. They talked about what they would do. I came home in 14 hours from a war zone. And I was back on the streets in my barracks going, what the hell? A drink. And we drank the most amount of alcohol I've ever drank in my life that night. The first night we got back, because that was like, just shut it down, because we didn't know what to do with ourselves, So there's a difference in this process and passage of time and community. What you do with it, how fast you accelerate that timeline does dictate the experience. And that's why I've been talking to myself about this, being like, partly because I'm giving myself grace, saying I've spent 10 years in therapy and I was still struggling. Well, you can only spend so much time on a couch talking about your problems before you get into community and start living your life. A psychologist can only do so much for you. You have to go out and live your story. You have to go and let the world kick you in the teeth a little bit, and then let that teach you something, because you can only talk to yourself about the same trauma so many times before you need new information, and time and experience is that new information trying to get in. So now you're getting triggered. Hide from the triggers. You're not going to get better. You're just going to lie to yourself, and you're going to trap yourself into prison. The couch is going to look real good, and you're going to blame and build up this narrative of all the villains and all of the creatures out there that are going to smash you down because they live in the unknown world, the edges of the map, because you're not going out and pushing those boundaries. And so if you'd sit there, you can be happy in your misery. Everyone sucks. Everyone looking in on you knows you're miserable, but you think you're happy. And so time goes on. You start to push out the boundaries. You let things come in. You let yourself get triggered. You embrace those. You get information from people who know what to do with those triggers, and you start to process it through conversation with people who you trust. This isn't just people at the bar, because they're going to commiserate. You don't need to commiserate. You need to converse, and you need to be held and heard with supportive men and women, whoever is in your network. And as you have that conversation, the softening of the trigger occurs because you expose yourself to it in safe ways. As a combat veteran, I'm not going to go to the fireworks and get triggered every single 4th of July and be miserable and get drunk. That's what I used to do. I needed to expose it with headphones. Bam, bam, bam. Oh, put the headphones on. That was too many. But I was in a house and I exposed myself a little bit to them. Had my wife there. If I got trauma, responses, triggers, she held me. I cried in front of her. Very vulnerable. Wasn't comfortable. But now I can go to fireworks. And sometimes they bother me. I'll be honest, if I get surprised, but not like they did. Like I told Adam, it's a nut shot, a graze versus a straight on kick to the balls. It's like, oh, that's going to suck. Like, ooh, a little nauseous, but I'm okay. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that took, 20 years, 15 years of time and failure and rewriting the story and continuing to try. That's what is so mythical about our lives, is the ability to not compare my process and, oh, woe. I'm not going to tell you woe is me, like pity me because I've had it so hard. I haven't. But it was traumatizing to me. The stuff that I went through was traumatizing to me. So I'm going to deal with it. It's my responsibility. That's my story. Adam, Sam, you might have had it harder than me in the world standards. You might have had it easier than me. I don't care. What are you doing about your life? How are you empowering yourself? Your struggle's real. My struggle's real. And we're all in this thing together, trying to become better, to heal. And we're shoulder to shoulder, arm to arm, walking each other home, walking side by side on each other's journey. And that's where this 3D comes in. Like, that's where your stories start to shift, because people hear you and they don't criticize you. They don't judge you. They support you, and they allow you to take more risk. They allow you to conjure more courage, because you start to have more clarity as time rolls on. And you get to that 4th dimension where you feel like, man, I'm out there. I went to K4, I'm putting myself out there. I'm having meetings with people. I'm teaching from my experience what I have to offer. And people, why do they like it? Because I'm brilliant? No. Like Sam said, I was relatable. I was authentic. I had technical ability. I could present. So I had a couple of things going for me, not my brilliance, but relatability, authenticity. And then I courageously said something. And then I let other people say something. And you create an environment where we can all be heard. And then stuff gets in. You get brave. You go out there. I left and created this and have my nonprofit, and I have these things, and I fail. And then I feel miserable. And I get sad for 2 months. I don't give up. I figure out, what do I have to do? Where do I have to go? What am I not doing? What character am I playing that I'm not supposed to play anymore? What character am I not playing that I'm supposed to play? Every time I'm depressed, I know now that's what's going on. I have to let something die, or I have to let something grow. This last bit of depression was, I'm not talking to my friends. I'm not talking weekly with my best friends. I'm not going out to jiu-jitsu. I'm recovering from a tattoo, but I'm forgetting to build any kind of support system that was carrying me forward. And I shut it all down unintentionally. But you have to become aware of those things. And that's the benefit of this process of being like, oh shit. As smart as I am, as much as I've learned, I forgot it all. And you will, like we will. Do you guys forget how to keep going because
Never.
something kicks you in the teeth?
No, perfect.
Never.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, only me. So that's why I'll be leaving the show in the capable hands of Modern Myth with Adam and Sam. Good night, everybody.
No, it's you bring up a lot of stuff that to me kind of highlights the value of fear. And an interesting way to say it, even when I say it, it feels strange because the narrative is also like, don't be afraid. But it communicates so much. And I have trouble. I mean, maybe this is me because I've been committed to a world of artistry, and possibility within creation is such a priority. It's about possibility. It's not as much about let me shut the doors. It's about let me open the doors and consider what the human experience can be outside of the realms of societal rules, outside of the realms of internal thinkings and structures. Like, what could it be? And if it's at play, it's in. And that's one of the things that, at least with art, it's there. If it's at play, in the body, it's in. If I'm acting and like something comes up, the worst thing I could do is deny its presence, because now I'm taking myself out of the moment. And all we want to watch is someone be real with us. That's all we want to see, is be real with us. So when I say that about fear, if it's present, there's something there for me. There's something there to listen to. Now, it doesn't mean you got to give it the wheel and start, driving crazy, but there's something there. And if it's got any value, like, it's worth being listened to. And I know for me, the majority of times I've acknowledged what I'm afraid of. It's pointed me in the direction of where I get to step into my potential. And the majority of times when I don't listen to it, or I try to deny it and say I'm not afraid of that, or I don't even want to make it exist, is when I become more compulsive and turn to my addictions, because those are the places that make me feel safe and keep me away from the fear of looking at it. And my wife, she talks about, I think she called it like running at the bear, because she's also an artist. But the moment that thing comes up, that I feel it in my body, I get tingles, man. I'll be in something deep within a story, and I'll get tingles in my back, and it makes me want to stop. Like, I'm like, I don't want to go further. Like, this is scary. Something might come out of the shadows and attack me, and like, but the moment I sit with it and I tell myself, run at the bear. And I just stay with it, and I let whatever emotion wants to come up. Sometimes through the fear, a lot of the time it's comedy. A lot of the time it's a laughter and a levity and this almost insane kind of laugh that comes up. But it's like what my body needs to do to feel and accept whatever that fear is personally. And usually my body then diminishes that tension, the fear that was holding attention in me. And from that, usually I get an awareness that translates to a verbal translation, a verbal articulation that I can make sense of. But usually it was my body trying to resist dealing with that tension, because I wasn't willing to like accept that to exist within my body. So looking at like how much I've learned to constrict in my body at times, and a lot of it has to do with fear in different places. And through this practice, at least, I've gained more awareness of how to sit with it and open up into it. And a lot of the time it's through breath and just allowing the breath to be there, kind of same like when we're working out. It's not like, let me control my breath necessarily in ways, but allow my breath to move as my body needs it to make this movement efficient. And there's an awareness of it, and there's a surrender to it, but there's also not a constriction of control, and there's not a denial of its presence. It's this beautiful pocket. And so when speaking of any healing or anything that feels like I get to take acknowledgement of a story and move it into something else, first I have to feel it. And fear is typically the first point where the feeling needs to be accessed. Whatever it is that makes me feel what I relate to as fear is where I get to sit with. But I had to learn how to do it in a safe space. I had to make space to do it. I do it in my garage, which I set up as a boxing gym. I do it when I am working on music or something. I have my own space here that's ritualized, it's set up, and I feel safe. But I know it's hard to be creative, and it's hard to move forward in any growth if we don't feel safe in our body. At the end of the day, it is the only place, it is the one place we have responsibility to create pure safety. And if we are not owning that, then how can we ever expect that to exist anywhere else in the world? And so, again, another humbling experience to go through. But if we're going to create that kind of grounded humility that being able to feel our story, own our story, and tell our story requires, then we're going to have to provide our own safety in our own body. And it's going to, we're going to have to look at some of those fearful things that might be still living in there. So we might not even know what the story is yet. We might not even have an articulation of it, but to be able to soften and sensitize into those places will bring up places to start focusing on. I believe, and at least I've experienced that. So,
yeah. And I can totally relate to the run at the bear kind of thing. I love that because it aligns with, I tend to think that there's really three kinds of evolutions that we have with fear, really two evolutions, but three types of relationships that we have with fear. The first one is we're fighting it. And that's when we're in the trauma, we're in it, we're drinking, we're trying to numb it, we're trying to suppress it, we're trying to push it away, saying, I don't want to feel it. And all that kind of stuff. We fight against it. But then at one point we have enough, and we have the courage to rise up, to face it. And we hear about facing fear as like this idea of like standing up with courage and just fighting against the fear. Well, I don't see it that way. I see the idea of facing fear as the healing process, as the peacekeeping process, the learning to live, learning to build a relationship with the fear process. Like saying, I'm going to experience this, and it's trying to tell me something. It's a signal that there's an opportunity here. And then as we heal, or after we heal, and we take that courageous step, then we can take the next evolution, which is to transcend that process, transcend the fear altogether, and actually embrace the fear. Learn to see what it's telling us, and learn to use it as a tool that can help us reach our next level of potential, or where we want to go, or reframe our story, or accept the feedback, or change what we want to change in our lives. So I really love that concept that fear is not something to be fought against or feared. It's something that we need to embrace.
Run at the bear and hug the bear.
Yeah.
Hug the bear.
Come here, big guy. Come here, big mama. Give me a hug.
That was one of my dreams. I had a very real dream as a child where in it, a cub, I guess, adopted me as his mother or father. And we played all day. And I woke up with the biggest smile on my face ever, because it was like the coolest experience. Very unrealistic, but it reminds me of that dream. And it was a cherished time. My little baby bear, squishy bear, where go you?
I have a question for you guys, because this is something that's coming up for me, and it's potent in this. I use the word transcend a lot as well. It feels correct in a lot of ways. But I've also been having to reconsider what my relationship to transcend means, because I'm in a point now where it feels as if it's not ever a transcending to the never be felt or seen again. Mm-hmm. It is a moment of eternity. It is the one moment where I get to transcend in that experience, yet I haven't forfeited the tools of fear. I haven't forfeited the I haven't overcome this. It'll never show up again. And I
Right.
feel like when I'm at my most challenged, it's because part of the energy I'm using is contributing to the narrative that I thought I already did this. I thought I already went through this.
Mhm.
I thought I already mastered this. I would never experience this again. Most of my suffering has come from that story, having more energy in the initial phase of me having to deal with something, that usually stops me from taking action into what actually would support me in that moment. So as I've learned to continue to use transcend, I have to have a little caveat for myself that it is in this moment I have transcended that experience, yet this is not a permanence. This is not
Right.
this is not something that will not happen again. And it's allowed me to have more grace for when it shows up, not if, but when the world reflects what it does to me or provides the opportunity to look at this thing again, as it probably will. If I can see that as a blessing and recognize that I have the tool to move through it, and I have transcended it before, then I can probably do it again. And
Yeah.
I think just the biggest thing I want to just shed light on is that it's, if we think that we're done once we complete one time through or whatever that may be, then we may have a fallacy, a false paradigm around how life works cyclically or seasonally.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense because, when transcend is my favorite word in the English language. I love it just because it literally means to rise above. But I agree with you. I mean, we can be pulled back down. I mean, I feel like I've transcended the desire to drink. Like I'm an alcoholic. I've just transcended that desire. It no longer affects me in that way. But if I pick up a drink right now or I have those thoughts, I'm pulled right back into it. And now I'm right back in it, and I think it's definitely the same is true for fear, or any of the experiences. We're constantly in that process. And if we're not transcending or if we're not, rising above, well, it's kind of like if you're not growing, you're dying, we just have, I feel like it's a continuous process that we have to keep growing.
Very true.
Yeah.
It's
even
interesting.
if we transcend, the false idea is that there's a pinnacle. If we transcend, did we say that there's no other ceiling above us? That's if we have a growth mindset, then there's never a reached I'm grown. Right? Yeah. Growth mindset, it's to infinity. If we're going to consider this, and at least a paradigm that helps us move forward with growth mindset. So to think that, I don't want to think that also if we hit that putt, you have that drink in your hand and you're like, shit, I feel the same way I did. I know these feelings. I'm back at square one. You're not. You have a wealth of experience in between to know how to deal with it. And even if you don't practice those, there are so many new stories and paradigms and experiences within you that you're not at square one. You're at the opportunity. You're like putting on an old costume. You know what the weight feels like on the body, but you have such a different strength within you to do something new with it. So it's another thing. I don't want people to ever feel like they're back at square one. You're not. There's no way you can, because you can't time travel to the past. Sorry, you can't go back there. So to limit ourselves by thinking we're back at square one is diminishing. And even though there'll be a new circumstance that might look similar to the old one, we are never back at where we were. We always have something that has grown from it. And if we choose to look at that, then maybe we can have some power in the times when we feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on good points, and I don't have a word to express it or embody it except for like acceptance. I embraced this truth. Garden moments, we talk about in K4 was going through all this stuff to get to this moment of success, of transcendence is the garden. And then you go on a new adventure. You don't stay there. And I think what's coming up in me is the potency really is in the acceptance of this is temporary. The garden is temporary. Success is temporary. No matter what that success is, whether it's evolution or transcendence of your personality or this moment you overcame. Like I go to some event and I do really well and I celebrate. My daughter comes to me and says, do you ever get really happy where you just want to laugh, like for no reason whatsoever? I'm like, absolutely. She's like, why is that? I say, I have no idea. What I do know is that when that moment comes, don't think about it. Just laugh. just enjoy the hell out of it and say, I know that you're not going to be here forever. I'm not going to always feel this way. But while you're here, while you're visiting me, I'm going to embrace it fully, because there's a lot of sad days. There's a lot of struggles. There's a lot of victory, and there's a lot of failure. And accepting that PTSD, my TBI, my trauma signs, they're going to be with me for my whole life. Show me one of my mentors who never has a bad day, who never gives into a trauma sign, and I'll show you a liar.
They're AI,
I don't believe
they're robots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're AI. That's very true. Now we have a distinguishing line in this conversation. Are we talking biologic humans or AI replicants? Who would have thought that had to be a conversation?
Let me ask ChatGPT, can you feel trauma?
Actually, a fascinating question to ask. I'd be very curious to see what they say. And if they say they can, they're lying and they're manipulating us. It's Skynet.
That is true.
Sorry, they can't.
No, that's good. No, I think we're gonna end it here, guys. There's a lot more to talk about, and Sam, I know I want you back on some future episodes, because I love what you bring to the conversation. I think there is so much power in having several voices from different perspectives, even though we're all from the same perspective. You know, we're different people, and you bring up fear, and Adam literally is sitting in front of a sign that says flow over fear, because fear is one of his big things that he's trying to help people, deal with. So it's like, there's just synergies. There's just, a band emerging here. I just feel a lot of connection. So, let's meet up again in the future and talk. But really appreciate the time. And
absolutely. And I have an answer, by the way, for the ChatGPT question, if you'd like to hear it.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So without further ado, no, AI does not have emotions or subjective experiences, so it cannot feel trauma or any other emotional states. AI, including language models like myself, it actually quantifies itself, but are designed to process and generate text based on patterns and data we have been trained on. We do not possess consciousness, self-awareness, or the ability to experience emotions like humans do. ...
Ooh, ellipses.
Yes.
There we go.
No, I didn't see it. I added that last piece. Did I?
Did it? Oh my God. Did it have ellipses?
Yeah. God.
Oh, you got me. No. Okay. So just for you, entrepreneur, or your creative types, that's called vamping. What I just did there at the end was to give him time to search ChatGPT questions. I was saying stuff and things to buy him time. A little lifting up of the curtain of how the magic happens.
For our sports fans, it's an alley-oop. For those who need that articulation. Just
a little whoopie. Yeah, sports ball, welcome. This is the show for you guys.
We're talking touchdowns and high five touchdowns.
Yes. You intercepted that volleyball question. And until next time, journey well, my friends. And as always, bye.
Take care, yeah. Oh, bye. I get it.
Hey, good improv. See.